as merchandise exports continue to fall for the third consecutive month in February, the government is looking to take steps to contain imports of non-essential items. Commerce Ministry has provided product-wise import figures to all the ministries. Commerce Secretary Sunil Barthwal said the ministry is expected to look at issues such as if those goods are being manufactured in India and if there is a sufficient capacity for those products. Containing these imports would also help reduce the trade deficit, which has reached at 247 USD billion in April to February of 2022 as against US dollar 172 billion in the same period last year. Remember, imports during the 11-month period of the current fiscal increased by 18.82% to 653 US billion dollars. At the same time, merchandise trade deficit in February stood at $17.43 billion, which is marginally lower than $17.75 billion recorded in the previous month, as both imports and exports are dipping 8% each. My colleague Karthik continues to be with me in the newsroom. Karthik, as exports are falling, the government is likely to contain the import of non-essential imports or non-essential items. How helpful is that?
You know, Shweta, I'm an ardent believer of the GDP formula, right? And I think we've discussed this a few times in the past also. But how do you calculate GDP? What are we really gunning for? I think we are gunning for the fact that we want the country to grow. And
Correct.
when we want the country to grow, we want the GDP to rise. How does the GDP rise? GDP is a function of four critical elements. Number one, consumption. How much is it's an average consumer spending on consuming goods and services? So what are you spending on fuel? What am I spending on clothes? What are you spending on, let's say, office travel? What am I spending on entertainment? What are the goods and services you are buying? You bought a phone, I bought a laptop. You went to a salon, got a haircut. I don't have that opportunity to really experience the inside of a salon. But largely anything that you're spending in the economy is contributing to the consumption side of the GDP. The next is government spending. So what is the government spending on? The supply side management. Government is spending on setting up any center of excellence. Government spending on through schemes which are providing ration to the poor or any other direct benefit which it is providing to the underprivileged. That constitutes the government spending. The next is investment. Private sector investment as well as government investment. So any kind of infrastructure investment, capital investment, factories being built, roads, highways, ports, airports, etc. All that goes into the third component of contribution to the GDP. Now, the fourth one is what is under discussion right now, which is net import. So net import is your export minus import. In an ideal world, you should be exporting more, importing lesser, and the deficit would actually turn to a surplus. Unfortunately, in India, we are still a highly import-centric economy, more than anything else because we import oil. And oil being a critical driver of the economy and of the industry and public transportation, cooking fuel, etc. So oil being a major import item keeps our import bill fairly high. At the same time, our exports have not been strong. Of course, it's picking up now relatively, but we've never been an export-centric economy, and our exports have largely been in the services space,
Right.
not as much in the manufacturing space. So we haven't been an export-centric economy, we've been an import-centric economy. So while there is consumption, there is government spending, there is infrastructure development investments, these three elements are working well for India. What pulls us down slightly is that we have a fiscal deficit, which means our exports are lower than our imports. Now, the best way to tackle this situation is to give a boost to the export rather than cut down on the import.
Right.
And why I say this, again, it's important to understand. Let's say an iPhone, which is now being manufactured in India, but let's say another company which is producing an iPhone-like phone, let's say costing ₹1 lakh, is non-essential, right? Now, what is the clause that the Commerce Ministry has given here? It's given the clause that you will reduce import if an equally competent product is getting manufactured in India. Are we manufacturing an equally competent product? If we were, I'm sure we would have already reduced the need to import it because
Right.
market practices would have come to play. An equally exciting, equally agile product available made in your country, giving you the same level of satisfaction at the same price point, if not a lower price point, as compared to another which you're importing. So market dynamics would have in any case favored the homegrown product. It would have been cheaper to produce, easier to access, and would not have come with the high taxes that we pay on imported goods. So the point is, you cut down on non-essential imports, but this non-essential import, which is part of the fourth element of the GDP definition, is actually also playing its way into the first part of the GDP equation, which is consumption. So you're paying for the same model phone costing a lakh of rupees in INR, and there is a tax which is going on that, there's a GST going on that. It is all actually contributing to the economic growth only. So by reducing import, if you are cutting out on the choice and the ability of somebody to pay for a good quality product, you're actually cutting down on your own tax base as well.
Right.
So the fillip really has to be to make our manufacturing and our exports competent enough that we increase the E of the formula rather than reduce the I in the same equation.
Okay. You know, imports are also down by 8.8% in the month of February. What exactly are the reasons for this contraction? What exactly is hurting the supply chain?
So we know for a fact that that we are not importing as much from China as we used to. While the number is still high, and the number is, I'll have to look into what are the elements which are leading to this reduction in import as well. But I think at a macro level, there is a sentiment to not buy the Chinese goods. While they're still flooded in the market, and there's no denying that that they're cheaper and they're more lucrative for people to buy. But I think the national sentiment around reducing import from China is something that could have led to to this little dip in the import figure. At the same time, we've got to look at the fuel prices also. So we're talking about a time in the wake of the Russia-Ukraine war last year when fuel prices had surged. So if you're looking at the dollar value of oil imports back in 2022 as compared to 2023, 1 year down the down the road when it comes to the Russia-Ukraine war, obviously oil prices have also stabilized over time, and they have seen their ups and downs, but oil is not as expensive as it was at the start of the Russia-Ukraine war. And it's around this time last year that the war had actually broken out. It's been a little over a year to the war. So oil prices become one critical element in understanding the import bill per se. But overall, you've got IKEA setting up shop in hopefully soon in Greater Noida. We saw in the UP Investors Summit that announcement being made. Now again, when it comes to foreign players setting up a base in India, the mandate on FDI rules is that 35% of what they sell should be produced in India. So all global players, we've seen the Apple manufacturing shifting in fairly good measure to India, to a point that Indian-made Apple products were the highest exported Apple products, as compared to the other production centers and manufacturing centers that Apple runs across the world. So we are seeing that these are little elements which are going to protect India's interest and give a fillip to Make in India and give a fillip to Indian manufacturing when you look at it. But I think largely the import would have, the reduction in the import bill, marginal 8% would have stemmed from the oil prices.
Okay, so a decline there in both imports and exports, keeping the trade deficit to about $17.43 billion in the month of February. Obviously augurs well for the government and vindication to cut down excise duty on imports of non-essential products. Thanks very much, Karthik, with all those details.
Thanks, Shweta.